Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation's LNTV. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Now today I'm joined by Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, Liberty Nation's Legal Affairs Editor, to discuss some happenings in Virginia. Now Virginia Democrats have taken a break from banning guns as often as they can to pass two bills that relate to allowing illegal immigrants the right to obtain a driver's license. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Thank you, Mark.
Now, Scott, please tell me, is this exactly what it sounds like? Are illegal immigrants now being given the option or the right to get valid U.S. driver's licenses?
Yes, that's what we have. One bill passed in the Senate, one bill passed in the House. Governor Northam, a Democrat, will almost surely sign whatever bill actually makes it out of the legislature. And one of those bills includes a restriction on voting and voter registration, and one of them does not. And that is one of the main controversies about illegals and driver's licenses.
Okay, now I believe this whole sort of aura around driver's licenses and voting started back with Bill Clinton. Could you go into that a bit for us?
I will, yeah. So in 1993, they passed the motor voter law. And what that did was it mandated that anytime somebody was processing a driver's license application, they also be given the opportunity to register to vote at that time. Now, the main problem with that, Mark, is that the necessary bona fides to establish one's driving privileges are not always the same with respect to voting, with respect to citizenship. As you might imagine, in this case, for instance, and we've had this in California and other places that have given illegals the ability to get a driver's licenses. Now, the problem, Mark, is there's supposed to be an audit on the back end of the voter registration system, which is to say, let's say in a month, the DMV processes X number of thousands of driver's license applications, and commensurate with those applications will be some significant number of voter registration applications. At some point, somebody is supposed to go through the voter registration applications and say, okay, did these applications actually meet with the standard required, the legal standard required to register to vote? Namely, of course, being a valid, a U.S. citizen is one of the requirements for voting. And there is not that effort taken on the back end. And so what we have, Mark, is a sort of backdoor way for Democrats, and to be clear, this is about Democrats and not Republicans, meaning the illegal immigrants are by far, the majority of them will vote Democrat in vast numbers. So it makes sense from the Democrat Party perspective. If you can get as many of these people in as possible and register to vote, then power will accrue to Democrat candidates and the party.
I mean, is it likely that this legislation, if Governor Northam signs it, will lead to the increase in illegal voting, in your opinion?
It's almost, unless there's some, unless they make the license itself physically like a weird color or something like that, because in Virginia you do have to present photo ID to vote. Then I could see maybe that being a sufficient protection. But the answer to your question is yes. And sadly, we can't ascribe nefarious motives to all of the legislators who will vote for this or the governor who will sign it. But certainly some of them just have the motivation of this is going to increase the spoils for the Democrats. Now, there are many people, Mark, I just want to say this, that it's a real problem for these people and the rest of us, I say as a Virginia resident, who drives amongst these illegals. So there are practical concerns that this legislation does address. I want to make that clear. It's not just this is some backdoor voting scheme. That's a big benefit, I think, for some of these Democrats, but also it's a real social ill they're trying to address. These drivers can't purchase car insurance, for instance, because they don't have, they're not legal drivers, and they can't be sort of dealt with as normal citizens. Citizens, a funny word, right? Normal members of society. But the federal government has said they're not going to deport these people en masse. So they're here. They're going to stay here in very large numbers. What are we going to do about that? It's a practical problem for the legislature to address.
So, Scott, I have a question regarding state and federal law. Now, obviously, this is just a state thing at present and likely to remain so. But should for example, an illegal immigrant who has some kind of work in Virginia, and they go forward to get a driving license, a legal driver's license, and then they move state. Now, I'm aware that driving licenses are different and issued in different states, state to state. But is there a grace period during which time they could vote in a different state?
Probably. There's probably no mechanism for that to be in place. And what I mean by that is, if they can get a Virginia driver's license, if you have one and it doesn't have some kind of new classification where it's not in the regular computer database. So if I go across to West Virginia, for instance, and say, okay, I moved now to West Virginia, I'd like a driver's license here, then no, Mark, there is no mechanism or provision. And that's exactly why Republicans and conservatives are so up in arms about these voting measures, because they are used for so many people to vote inappropriately. And many of the people who are doing this aren't, again, we don't even necessarily need to ascribe bad actions to them. You're an immigrant to this country, you go to get a, legal or not, you go to get a driver's license, which is very important to live in an area where public transportation is almost non-existent. And it says on the computer, would you like to register to vote? Well, it's very easy for somebody to be confused about whether they're legally able to register to vote when presented with that prompt on the screen, right? They presume that the computer knows more about their status than they do. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important for many Virginians to say, this is not okay, this kind of automated voting. And, when we started the program, Mark, you alluded to the guns issue. And how the Virginia legislature is trying to remake the state in terms of its gun laws. Well, one of the reasons why is because of all the immigrant voters that we have in Virginia that are hostile to gun rights. So for those of us that are here and treasure our individual rights, we want to make sure that to the extent possible, people who are not permitted to legally vote here shouldn't, especially when there are the kinds of people who are likely to maybe not treasure individual rights, but instead collectivism.
Scott, thank you very much for the update. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Mark.
And thanks to you at home.
Hi, folks. Lisa K. Donner here, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com. We hope you enjoyed watching this video, maybe even learned a thing or two. If so, please take a moment and subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there in the corner. Thanks so much.